Imagine you are standing on a beach in Mexico. The year is 1519.
Okay, setting the scene.
Yeah, so the Spanish conqueror Hernando Cortez has just landed to establish a colony, right? But his strategic situation is fundamentally a nightmare.
That's totally.
He has like 600 men,
Yeah.
and he is facing an Aztec empire of literally millions. I mean, he is massively, overwhelmingly outnumbered.
The math is definitely not in his favor.
Not at all. So what does he do? He turns around and in full view of his own terrified men and, the observing Aztec scouts, he burns his own ships to the waterline. He just sets his only way home on fire.
Which is, it's one of the most drastic, counterintuitive military decisions in history, and yet it worked.
It actually worked, and that is exactly the paradox we are tearing apart in our deep dive into the source material today.
It's a fascinating one, for sure.
We are looking at a really diverse stack of sources to understand the mathematical logic of human conflict. On one hand, we have this really provocative Reddit thread. It argues that global climate change is fundamentally a massive game theory problem.
Right, taking a macro look.
Exactly. And to pair with that, we have a 2006 Master of Laws thesis from McGill University. And this takes that exact same mathematical logic, but applies it to something intensely personal, which is family law negotiations and divorce.
So we are taking the underlying architecture of decision-making, and we're looking at it on a global scale, and then on a micro, intimately human scale.
Yeah, and the mission for you listening right now is to extract that hidden architecture. We really want to uncover why we fight, why so many negotiations completely fail, and how understanding the actual rules of the game can help you transform a destructive zero-sum standoff into a collaborative win.
Because the rules are always there, whether we see them or not.
Exactly. So let's go back to that beach in 1519. Cortez burning his ships is, well, it's basically the ultimate extreme commitment device.
It really is.
Like giving your friend your credit card so you can't buy junk food, right? But I struggle to see how intentionally limiting your own options gives you, more power in a negotiation. Doesn't power usually come from having the most leverage and the most escape routes?
In a traditional sense, yeah, absolutely. But game theory, which was codified as a formal mathematical study back in 1944 by John von Neumann and Oscar Morgenstern, it flips that whole assumption on its head.
How so?
Well, game theory is the study of decision-making in situations where your optimal choice relies entirely on anticipating what the other player's going to do.
Okay.
So Cortez wasn't just destroying wood and canvas. He was mathematically altering the strategic calculus for two completely separate groups of people by manipulating their anticipation.
Ah, because he removed the option of retreat for his own men. So their only choice was to fight or die.
Exactly. That is the internal calculation. But the external calculation is even more powerful. He manipulated the confidence of the Aztecs.
Oh, because they were watching.
Right. The Aztec soldiers observed this whole thing and reasoned, who would destroy their only escape route unless they were absolutely certain they were going to win.
Wow, that's wild.
By removing his own escape hatch, Cortez sent this undeniable, mathematically binding signal of absolute commitment. And the result? The Aztecs retreated without a fight.
Unbelievable.
Cortez understood that in a conflict, knowing the other party has no way out, it fundamentally alters how everyone plays the game.
So if altering the available strategies is how you win, that brings up a concept from the thesis that seems like a massive roadblock to me. The author spends a lot of time on utility versus stated goal.
Yes, a very crucial distinction.
And it seems like humans are notoriously terrible at expressing what their actual utility is.
Oh, we are awful at it. But utility theory is the bedrock of game theory. You really cannot build a winning strategy until you know what the players actually value.
Right.
The stated goal is just what someone says they want. But the utility, that's the underlying emotional or financial or, practical need they are actually trying to fulfill.
The thesis uses O. Henry's classic short story, The Gift of the Magi, to illustrate this, which I thought was brilliant. You have a husband and wife deeply devoted to each other, but very impoverished.
Oh, it's a classic story, yeah.
The wife cuts off her beautiful hair and sells it to buy a platinum chain for her husband's prized pocket watch. But at the exact same time, the husband sells his prized pocket watch to buy fancy combs for his wife's beautiful hair.
It's a profound display of affection, but mathematically it's a catastrophic failure of cooperation.
Right, because they ruin the gifts for each other.
Exactly. They both achieved their overarching utility, which was demonstrating their love. But their immediate goals were entirely thwarted because they hid their true intentions. They wanted the gifts to be a surprise.
So if communicating our utility is the secret to getting what we want, why do we constantly lie about it? Like, why do people in a divorce negotiation demand, I must keep the house, when their actual utility is just, I want stability for my kids, or I'm terrified of change?
It all comes down to risk. The moment you reveal your true utility, your actual underlying need, you expose a vulnerability.
Oh, I see.
If you tell an adversary that you don't actually care about the physical house, you just want your kids to stay in the same school district, well, a hostile opponent can weaponize that information.
Yeah, they could threaten to fight for primary custody unless you give up your share of the retirement accounts or something.
Precisely. Revealing utility in an adversarial environment is mathematically dangerous.
Okay, let's map out the mathematics of that danger.
Mhm.
Because the sources heavily reference probably the most famous concept in game theory, which is the prisoner's dilemma.
Ah, yes. Developed in the 1950s by Merrill Flood and Melvin Drescher at the Rand Corporation.
That's the one. Let's walk through the matrix for our listeners. Imagine two people are arrested for a joint crime. The police place them in completely separate interrogation rooms.
They cannot communicate at all.
Right, no communication. And the police offer them both the exact same deal. So, let me guess the optimal strategy here.
Yeah.
They both just stay silent and refuse to cooperate with the police.
That is what a perfectly cooperative pair would do, yeah. If they both stay silent, the police lack the evidence for the main charge. Both prisoners get a minor sentence, let's say 2 years in prison each.
But they are separated. They can't coordinate that.
And that is exactly where the trap lies. The police add a temptation. If you confess and betray your partner, but your partner stays silent, you go completely free. 0 years.
Whoa, okay.
But your silent partner gets slammed with 5 years and vice versa. However, if you both betray each other and confess, the police have enough evidence to put you both away for 4 years.
Okay, so I'm sitting in that room. I have to act in my own rational self-interest, and I have no idea what my partner is doing. If my partner stays silent, my best move is to confess, because I go from 2 years in prison down to 0.
Correct.
But if my partner confesses, my best move is still to confess, because I go from 5 years down to 4.
Yes. No matter what the other person does, the math dictates that your optimal individual move is to betray them.
Man, that's dark.
It is. This state is known as a Nash equilibrium, named after the mathematician John Nash. A Nash equilibrium is basically a situation where no player can improve their individual outcome by unilaterally changing their own strategy.
Okay.
So because rational self-interest pushes both players to confess, they reach this stable equilibrium where they both get 4 years.
But that's a terrible outcome. I mean, if they had just trusted each other to stay silent, they would have only gotten 2 years. They optimized themselves into a worse collective result. Is the math just broken? Or is this like mathematical proof that human nature is fundamentally wired for self-sabotage?
The math is actually flawless. What is broken is the environment. Yeah, the tragedy of the prisoner's dilemma isn't the calculation of risk. It is the physical walls of the interrogation room. The inability to communicate, establish trust, and enforce an agreement turns the situation into a defensive posture where betrayal is really the only logical shield.
Okay, this maps perfectly onto the Reddit thread we sourced about climate change.
It really does.
The poster points out that global warming is essentially just a planetary prisoner's dilemma. If every nation coordinates and cuts emissions, the entire globe benefits.
A non-zero-sum game.
Exactly. But individually, every nation calculates that if they keep bringing cheap fossil fuels while everyone else cuts back, their specific economy gets a massive advantage.
And if everyone else keeps burning fossil fuels, well, they better keep burning them too, just to survive the economic fallout.
Right. The perfectly rational economic choice for the individual nation inevitably leads to global ruin.
The thesis actually provides a striking historical parallel for this from Plato's Republic.
Oh, right, the frontline soldier.
Yes, consider a frontline soldier preparing for battle. He makes a rational calculation. If his army wins the battle, his individual contribution was likely minimal. He could have safely hidden, and his side still would have won.
Makes sense.
But if his army loses, and he is standing on the front line, he will die. Therefore, whether the battle is won or lost, the perfectly logical choice for his own self-preservation is to abandon his post and run away.
But if every soldier makes that rational calculation, the army disintegrates and they all get slaughtered anyway.
Precisely. They are forced down a decision tree where every branch leads to a worse collective outcome, simply because they cannot guarantee the commitment of the person standing next to them.
So we see how this mathematical trap plays out on a global scale with climate change and on a theoretical scale with soldiers and prisoners. But the McGill thesis takes this framework and applies it to the most intimate, devastating setting possible, which is the legal dissolution of a family.
And the statistics there are very revealing. Over 90% of family law cases end in a negotiated settlement, not a trial.
Wow, 90%.
Yeah, so that means 90% of the time, the outcome of a family's future isn't decided by a judge. It is determined by how well two highly emotional parties navigate a high-stakes game theory matrix.
And the thesis highlights a reality that drastically skews this matrix. It's worth noting here that the thesis relies heavily on psychologist Carol Gilligan's framework regarding gender bias and bargaining power.
Right, an important context.
And whether you subscribe to her broader sociological conclusions or not, her model is what the author uses to explain the profound power imbalance in these negotiations. Gilligan suggests that, generally speaking, men and women often approach negotiations with entirely different internal utilities.
Yes, she breaks it down into two ethics.
Right. Males traditionally operate on an ethic of rights, focusing on rules, logic, and winning the positional argument, whereas females often rely on an ethic of care, which focuses on preserving relationships, maintaining harmony, and a responsibility to others.
And when you place someone negotiating based on an ethic of rights against someone negotiating based on an ethic of care in a traditional adversarial legal setting, the playing field is entirely uneven.
Because they value different things.
Exactly. The party valuing the relationship or prioritizing the emotional well-being of the children will often trade away essential financial security just to make the conflict stop.
Man, it sounds like putting two people at a chessboard, but one person is playing to capture the king, and the other person is playing to make sure none of the pieces get hurt. How can a system claim to be fair if the rules only reward the person trying to capture the king?
Well, the brutal reality is that a traditional adversarial legal system is not designed to balance differing utilities. It is designed to declare a winner.
Right.
In fact, the mechanics of the system actively exploit those differing utilities.
Let's unpack the actual mechanics of that. How does the legal system mathematically force betrayal?
Well, consider the incentive structures. You have the billable hour, which financially rewards lawyers for prolonged conflict and extensive legal posturing. So true.
You have the discovery process, which often devolves into an expensive game of hiding and forcing the extraction of information. One party can use the other's fear of a public custody battle or their lack of financial resources to pay those billable hours to essentially starve them out.
It's like a war of attrition.
It is. The adversarial system recreates the walls of the prisoner's dilemma interrogation room. It forces the vulnerable party into a corner where taking a terrible, inequitable settlement feels like the only rational choice left to survive.
And what makes this terrifying is the jurisprudential reality governing these contracts once they are actually signed. The thesis cites major Canadian Supreme Court cases, specifically Miglin v. Miglin and Hartshorn v. Hartshorn.
Yes, landmark cases.
I read through these, and the overarching legal precedent is that courts are incredibly reluctant to overturn negotiated agreements.
The courts prioritize certainty and the finality of contracts. They simply do not have the resources to second-guess the emotional fairness of every private agreement. The assumption is that two adults entered into a contract rationally. But the court completely ignores the game theory trap that forced the bad choice to begin with. The court's view is essentially freedom of contract. If you sign it, you are stuck with it, even if you traded away your entire financial future just to stop the yelling.
That is the reality. The threshold to reopen a bad deal is extraordinarily high. Getting the matrix right the first time is paramount, because the system will not save you from a mathematically forced bad decision.
Okay, if the standard legal system is a rigged game that mathematically punishes cooperation, how do we escape it? According to our sources, you cannot just try to play the rigged game better. You have to literally rewrite the rules of the game from scratch.
This introduces the paradigm shift explored in the second half of the thesis, which is collaborative law and interest-based negotiation.
Right.
Much of this draws from the Harvard Negotiation Project and the landmark book Getting to Yes by Fisher, Urey, and Patton.
The thesis shares a perfect anecdote to explain interest-based negotiation: the library window.
Oh, I love this example.
Imagine two men furiously arguing in a library. One man demands the window be thrown wide open. The other demands it be slammed shut. They are arguing over positions. Halfway open, a quarter open. Neither will yield.
They are trapped in a zero-sum game. Every inch the window opens is a loss for the second man, and every inch it closes is a loss for the first.
Then the librarian walks over. She doesn't ask them what their positions are, she asks them what their true interests are. What is their actual utility?
Right, skipping the stated goals entirely.
Exactly. The first man says, I need fresh air. The second man says, I hate drafts. The cold air is hitting my neck. Once she understands their true utility, she walks into the next room over and opens that window wide. The fresh air circulates in, but there is no draft.
It's brilliant.
Neither man compromised. Neither gave up an inch of their position, but both got exactly what they needed.
That is the essence of moving from positional bargaining to discovering underlying utility. But collaborative law doesn't just ask people to be nice like the librarian. It mathematically enforces cooperation by fundamentally altering the payoff matrix.
How so?
In a collaborative law divorce, the two parties and their respective attorneys sign a binding contract from day one. They legally commit to resolving all issues through transparent negotiation without ever going to litigation.
Wait, hold on. I need to push back on this.
Sure.
If I'm going through a bitter divorce and I potentially hate my ex-spouse, why on earth would I sign a contract tying my hands from taking them to court? That feels like surrendering my only weapon.
You sign it because of the ultimate commitment device embedded in the contract. If the negotiations fail and one party decides they want to abandon the process and fight it out in front of a judge, the collaborative attorneys must withdraw.
Wait, really?
Yes.
Yeah.
They are legally barred from representing those clients in court.
So the clients would have to start completely over, spending thousands of dollars to hire brand new litigators, getting them up to speed, starting from zero. That completely flips the financial incentive of the lawyers. Instead of billing endless hours preparing for a trial, they are literally forced to be problem solvers. If the case goes to court, they lose their clients and their fees.
It changes the incentives for everyone. The
Yeah.
lawyers cannot secretly prepare for trial while pretending to negotiate. The clients cannot use the threat of a brutal court battle as a weapon to starve the other side out, because pulling the pin on that grenade blows up their own legal representation too.
They burn the ships,
Yeah.
just like Cortez.
Yes. By removing the escape hatch of the courtroom, collaborative law shifts the Nash equilibrium. The old equilibrium in the adversarial system was mutual betrayal, because betrayal offered a strategic advantage.
Right.
But in collaborative law, the penalty for betrayal, losing your lawyer, your time, and your money, is so catastrophic that mutual cooperation becomes the new, stable Nash equilibrium. Every ounce of collective energy is mathematically forced toward finding a solution.
It takes the prisoners out of their separate interrogation cells, puts them at a table together with full mandatory transparent disclosure, and says, you either figure out how to get 2 years together or you're both getting 10.
Suddenly, working together isn't just a nice idea. It is the only rational choice left on the decision tree.
As we wrap up this deep dive into the source material, I want you to take this framework and look at the conflicts in your own life. Think about the next time you are facing a standoff, whether it's negotiating a salary at work, navigating a tense argument with your partner, or dealing with a difficult coworker.
Always look for the utility.
Ask yourself, are we just arguing over the window being open or closed? Am I fighting for a position, or am I looking for the underlying utility? Can I step back, play the role of the librarian, and find the window in the next room?
Because if you do not define the true utility, you will always remain trapped in the dilemma, playing a game designed to make you lose.
I want to leave you with a final massive thought experiment to mull over, blending both of the sources we examined today. We just saw how the mathematical key to solving a localized prisoner's dilemma, like a bitter divorce, is a binding collaborative law contract. A system where the negotiators are personally, deeply penalized if they fail to reach a consensus.
Right.
Could we ever apply that same extreme commitment mechanism to our global crises? Imagine a climate change summit where the world's delegates are locked in a room, legally barred from leaving, and face severe, immediate personal or economic penalties if they do not produce a transparent, genuine consensus. If burning the ships forces two angry spouses to find a win-win, could forced collaboration save the world?
It forces us to ask how far we are willing to go to engineer our own survival, especially when relying on good intentions has mathematically failed us.
You take those pristine mathematical formulas, drop them into the messy, emotional reality of human conflict, and sometimes the equation forces us to be better than we are. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.